If we can't get this pipeline built, it means that Canada is broken. Justin Trudeau killed the Northern Gateway pipeline. He killed the Energy East pipeline. He surrendered to Barack Obama's veto of the Trans Mountain pipeline. He's doing nothing to ensure the respect for the rule of law in the construction of the Trans Mountain pipeline. If we can't get this project built, it means that we will strand hundreds of billions of dollars of value for future generations, the ability to pay for our pensions, our health care, our quality of life as Canadians. It means that we'll be giving a huge historic gift to the OPEC dictatorships that don't have protesters or left-wing political parties doing everything to block their energy from going to global markets. If we can't get this pipeline project built, it means we'll continue to subsidize the American economy as we sell them our oil at a massive discount while they continue to be a growing global oil exporter. This is not just about Trans Mountain. This is not about one project. This is about a deliberate decade-long campaign by highly, and in many cases, foreign-funded special interest groups with their political allies to attack Canada's vital economic interests. And so far they're succeeding, having killed Northern Gateway and Energy East through Justin Trudeau, who has now brought a bill before Parliament that will kill the prospect of any future pipelines. The Canadian Energy Pipeline Association saying to Parliament last week that his bill C-69 will make it effectively impossible to get another pipeline approved. And so now it all comes down to this one project, which was approved well over a year ago. This suspension today was entirely predictable. In fact, I have been predicting this for months, pointing out that at some point the investors would begin to lose patience with the inability of Canadian governments to enforce the rule of law. This is also about what kind of country we live in. Do we live in a country predicated on the rule of law or not? This project was approved according to the highest environmental standards of any democracy on earth through the National Energy Board after exhaustive scientific review and public consultations. It was approved by the federal government using its exclusive constitutional authority. And that federal government has now stood by passively, uttering meaningless bromides for the past 9 months as the New Democrats in British Columbia have kept true to their promise to do everything within their power to stop Trans Mountain. And our provincial government has proven itself. You know, I've reached out to our Premier on multiple occasions. I've written letters offering all-party support on various strategies. I've suggested concrete steps to fight back for this and other pipelines. And what I've been met with is being mocked and ridiculed by the Premier, a refusal to engage or seek all-party consensus on these issues. And so let me say this. Part of the problem is that we have an NDP government here in Edmonton that has fumbled the ball from day one. Just last week, our Premier said that she did a victory lap and said we had won a decisive victory and the pipeline was going to be built because of one court decision. One decision on multiple appeals with multiple legal actions going on. I think the problem is this, that our new Democratic government, our new Democrats, they are aligned fundamentally and philosophically with the New Democrats in BC, the New Democrats in Vancouver government, the government of Burnaby, the government of Coquitlam, the federal New Democrats, all of whom are fundamentally hostile to Canada's hydrocarbon-based energy. This is a provincial NDP government made up of backbenchers who used to go to protests saying no oil, no tar sands, no pipelines. They don't really understand what they're fighting for here. And that's why I think our Premier keeps surrendering. My goodness, just a few weeks ago, she surrendered on the symbolic boycott of BC wine because she said the BC government had backed down. Our response was, no, the BC government is pursuing a deliberate strategy of death by delay. Several legal actions, proposed regulations, their close allies in municipal governments refusing permits, refusing to pay for police bills, their ideological fellow travelers blocking roads in illegal protests, all of it coordinated, designed to create exactly what we saw today, which, by the way, we've seen this movie before. The suspension of a pipeline pursuing with further review is exactly what happened on September the 7th, 2016, when TransCanada Pipeline announced the suspension of the Energy East project pending a further decision which cancelled it in October. So to hear the Premier here just a few minutes ago in this room literally laughing about this is hard to believe. This is not a laughing matter. This is about our vital economic interests. And that is why, for 9 months, I have called for a serious fight-back strategy, up to and including a willingness to turn off the taps of Alberta oil that currently fuels the Lower Mainland's economy. Our quarrel is not with ordinary British Columbians, the majority of whom support this project and environmentally responsible resource development. Our quarrel is with an ideological NDP government backed up by an even more doctrinaire Green Party that is undermining our Constitution, the rule of law, and our economic interests. When I first suggested those measures, the Premier mocked me, and then in January began to suggest maybe we should do some of these things. Well, now is the time for action, and for federal action. Our Premier keeps covering for her close ally, Justin Trudeau, apparently satisfied with nothing but empty words. It is time for the federal government to act like a federal government, for our Prime Minister to lead like a Prime Minister should in the national interest. Our Alberta government should, I repeat this call, ask the federal government to remove any illegal ambiguity by invoking the national interest section of the Constitution, section 9210C, and declaring this project as being in the common interest, to obviate any further legal stall tactics by the Victoria New Democrats. Secondly, if the federal government is going to punish Saskatchewan by withholding transfers because it doesn't want, in turn, to punish its citizens with the carbon tax, then why isn't the federal government also withholding transfer payments to John Horgan's New Democrat government in BC to demonstrate that they mean business in ensuring the rule of law? Thirdly, why did the Premier lift the wine boycott? Why didn't she, in fact, increase the economic pressure and sanctions on BC when they came out with yet another round of specious regulations a little over a month ago? So these are some of the measures that should be taken immediately. This requires serious national leadership right now, particularly from a Prime Minister who killed the two other major coastal pipeline projects. This is his chance to demonstrate whether or not he is a leader interested in protecting the Constitution and, quite frankly, national unity, which is now, I believe, increasingly at risk with these reckless actions. Finally, I have been preparing and will now say that I believe that the Government of Alberta must be prepared with the federal government to step up to provide financial certainty to the investors at Kinder Morgan. This project is essential for the national interest. It represents hundreds of billions of dollars of future value and tax revenue. And it is clear that the private sector investors, many of whom are in the United States, are losing patience. There is a market failure here. Now listen, I am a fiscal hawk, and I am philosophically opposed to corporate welfare. But when there is a major market failure, there is, I believe, and a question that is seriously in the national economic interest, there is a compelling case for the state to come forward using its credit and financial leverage to ensure economic progress. And I believe this is such an instance where you have a market failure. Why? Because the governments are refusing to ensure the rule of law. And so in that context, with that failure, I believe there is a need for the federal and provincial governments urgently to pursue with Kinder Morgan some form of financial partnership to diminish the risk to the shareholders and to demonstrate to the BC New Democrats, the protesters, and all of the opponents of progress that this will have the full backing of the Crown, of the treasuries of both the Canadian and Alberta governments. So there are a number of different financial instruments that could be used to provide that certainty, but I'm calling on both our federal and provincial governments to do so.